are live. And I'm going to pick on somebody in a second. Let me get my notes up here. Waiting for LinkedIn to show up. We're probably already on YouTube. And
45 seconds.
Here we go. Everybody wave hello. We're not going to start the show until we get our music. Dan Flanigan, I'm going to pick on you. I don't know. I'm picking on you. And all I have to do is say, behave yourself. That's your warning. Okay, you behave
30
yourself.
seconds.
Don Sawyer is saying, why didn't she pick on me? I might be the problem child here. Okay, we're ready. Michael, give us the feed when you can. I don't have a fancy countdown clock. 10 seconds.
Have an awesome show.
Okay, everybody's going to dance with me in the opening. Here we go. Come on, dance with me.
Welcome
Mr.
to Read My
Flanigan.
Lips Radio, a lively hour of
That's
unscripted
too
conversations with savvy creatives. Producer and host, aka Radio Red, asks novelists, artists, photographers, designers, comedians, actors, musicians, composers, screenwriters, directors, and technology innovators about their creative passion, inspirational muses, and how they create. Ooh, how those lips can talk. Now, here's AKA Radio Red.
Radio Red in the house. Thank you to the wonderful voice who introduces me. It's Monday. Where in the world would I be except here on Read My Lips Radio? We are live streaming on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube. And I want my guests, I haven't introduced them yet, to wave furiously virtually to the Voice America Empowerment Channel. And hello to my wonderful engineer, Michael is with us today. There you go. Okay, guests, before we do anything else, I want you to make the shape of the letter L, please, with either hand. It's fine. L, there we go. Oh, we've got a Star Trek one there. On the count of three, I want you to join me and say hello, LLL. Just at that pace. 1, 2, 3. Hello,
Hello.
L, L,
L.
L. Okay. Michael, I would like you to write that down, please, that they tie for first place on the most in sync LLL in about the past 6 months on the show. Okay, Michael will take care of that for me. Jordan usually does it. LLL is a lady named Lovely Lanky Laura Legs. She's my most loyal listener. Dan Flanigan, you getting all the L's in there? That's a real alliteration. And she lives in Whitestone, New York. And I've been trying to get her to move to London or Lakewood or Los Angeles or somewhere for years. I started a fake GoFundMe, and you know how much money I raised. Exactly that much. So I was looking at moving to London about a year and a half ago, and it was kind of expensive and a little bit hot. And I have this bad habit, DC, of tilting my head when I look at what I read. I tilt my head a little bit, and the first N in London flipped upside down, and all of a sudden it turned into Loudon, and I moved to Loudon, Tennessee. So I'm still trying to get Laura to move here because it starts with L and Whitestone doesn't. So there you go. Today is July 29th. It's the last day of July. Where have the first 7 months of the year gone? I don't know. It's the 210th day of the year in the Gregorian calendar. Somebody used to have a Julian calendar, and they had all the dates mixed up. October 3rd was next to October 15th. What did all those poor birthday kids do? I don't know. So Gregorian changed it. Bravo to you. 155 days left. It's the 31st Monday, and it's not time to say, start planning for New Year's Eve. It's a little bit early. So I'm going to read a little poem now that I co-created with ChatGPT, full disclaimer, and then I have a little quiz for the three of you. And DC, you've been on the show before. I might not let you answer, but if you really don't remember the answer, you can. Okay, here we go. When I call your name, please wave. So here we go. Welcome to Read My Lips Radio, creativity's vibrant space with AKA Radio Red and her Scarlett mic, always a happy face. On today's show, the itch of creativity. Ideas are set free with 3 guest creatives bringing their stories. You will see. Don Sawyer, wave hello, has a journey of varied flight from Canada to Newfoundland, teachings his guiding light. In West Africa, he trained. In Jamaica, he shaped the youth. His pen weaves tales of places of history and truth. Where the rivers meet and tomorrow is school, show his insightful gift with articles and op-eds. His words give readers a lift. Don Sawyer, what'd you think?
I think that's fabulous. I'm so impressed.
I'm glad. I rent these poems out. We'll negotiate the rate later. Don't worry. Thank you very much. Dan Flanigan is a lawyer with a poet's tender soul. From Tenebrae to detective tales, his creativity is on a roll. Peter O'Keefe's adventures across tales and schemes so bold. In an American tragedy, dark days of the past unfold. With a heart for addiction's fight and a child's guarded dream, Dan Flanigan pens stories that inform and redeem. Dan, what'd you think?
Well, I liked it. I'm actually shocked. I liked it. It was very good.
I'll tell.
I'm
I
like
have a,
Mikey in that commercial.
there you go. DC Gomez is back. She's been on 100 times, and she. Thank you to everybody from Mickey Mickelson sent me these wonderful guests. DC Gomez from the Army to Motivational Paths found her way. Her words a beacon of light that shine every day. Oh, she likes it. Urban fantasy, children's tales, her stories rich and wide, helping others find their strength with passion as her guide. From meditation's calm to a coach's inspirational why. DC's creativity soars, touching hearts, reaching for the sky. Oh, she's touched.
I like it.
So here's the closing. Join us, dear audience, in our creative quest with akaRadioRed, always bringing her best. The itch of creativity on this July 29th day with stories to inspire you to create, to live, and to play. What'd you all think? Impressed?
That was really nice. That was very, very nice.
Okay, here's the quiz. DC, I don't think DC remembers the answer, so you can play. How many minutes did it take ChatGPT to send me the core of that poem? I put in a full bio for each of you, which is up to 999 characters with spaces, and a little bit about the itch of creativity, me, the red mic, a little bit of this and that about what I wanted to say. How long? And I fed all of this in, and then I hit the submit button or the return key on my Mac. Don Sawyer, how many minutes did it take? Just put up a hand.
I have to confess that I saw you earlier and I was astounded at 1.6 seconds. I believe it was something along those lines.
Dan Flanigan, you want to take a guess? I didn't hear what Don said. I pretended I
I
didn't hear.
confess that I also saw a show earlier and know the answer.
I am so flattered. DC?
We do our homework.
Oh my goodness. Mickey sends me the best. DC, do you know the answer?
It's under 2, so yes.
It used to be 3.25 seconds, then it went down to 2, and now it's 1. I call it one in a spit. 1 in a spit. And I have a friend who told me to stop being so polite to ChatGPT. I'll say, good morning, how are you? Would you please write me a poem today? And then I pile all of this stuff in. I just keep adding. I put and I add all the bios, and then I hit the return key. In under 1.5 seconds, it has sent me, Don, you're absolutely shocked. And then I take it, I put it into my document, and then I work on it. I go back to your bios and make sure it has the highlights that I really want to share. So what do you all think? Pretty cool?
Amazing.
I don't know whether to be appalled or not.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I got you. I got you. By the way, I belong to a poetry group at Writer's Digest, and I never, ever use AI in any of my poetry. I write a limerick, I write a double or triple haiku, 575, and I write an acrostic with the prompt for that week every single Wednesday morning before my radio show. And I would never dream of using any AI LLM for my poetry. But for my radio shows, because I have these massive guest bios, I use it not as a crutch, but as inspiration. And then I work on the poem. So I'm glad you all enjoyed it. And I will negotiate a rental fee for the poems. Dan Flanigan, I'm trying to get him to spot. Oh, I got a wink from him. We're really in good shape today. Okay, here's the part where I'm going to ask you each to please introduce yourself more fully besides the wonderful vignette I shared for each of you. So, Don Sawyer, welcome. Nice to meet you. I'm putting you on full screen speaker view, so you behave yourself. And spend about 3 minutes. Tell us about why you're here, what your creativity is. Welcome, Don Sawyer.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for having me on the show. It's a great show. And you've done such a fabulous job with my poem. I'm not sure there's a lot to say. That was pretty inclusive. I was born in Michigan, but I came to British Columbia to do my PhD in modern Chinese history. Somebody once asked me, what were you going to do with that? Well, I was going to teach at the university level, but the Chinese language and I just did not get along. And so I ended up flunking out after 1 semester. So I was then looking for something to do. And when you're in the education field most of your life, you don't have any real skills, right? You can't lay bricks. So I figured, well, maybe somebody out there might want me to teach, but who? I'd never taken an education class. So I worked my way east, and the easternmost province in Canada is Newfoundland, and it still is a fascinating place. But it was the last province to join Canada in 1949. Oh my gosh, I hope I got that right. And they were so desperate that they hired me. So my wife and they hired my wife, who actually had an education course. So we went to this little tiny outport community in Newfoundland and had two of the most wonderful years of our lives there. It was a community that was moving from a very traditional way of life. They'd only had roads for 9 years to modernity. So it was a fascinating time to be there. That basically shaped me as a teacher and as an educator. I then worked in native Amerindian schools in British Columbia, which was another fascinating introduction to another world and another way of life. I then started working in West Africa, and I worked there for almost 10 years off and on, working with colleagues, West African colleagues, developing training materials for community development workers. And again, it was fascinating, and also writing and creative writing, because we ended up writing about 1,000 pages of curriculum. And it was all collaborative and relevant, and it was a wonderful project. And I still look back on that as some of the best times I had as a writer and as an individual. And so through all of this, I was also teaching and writing. My first book came out of the Newfoundland experience, and that is called Tomorrow is School. And I'm sick to the heart thinking about it. That's an adult nonfiction, which I'm pleased to report was used widely in teacher training programs across Canada. And then when we taught in the Native community, I was so appalled by some of the impact of colonialism on Aboriginal communities that I wrote a young adult novel based on that experience called Where the Rivers Meet. And again, that was used widely in Native classrooms across the country. So first of all, it was really great for sales, but more importantly, it validated the book. I mean, these were people who almost all Native themselves who identified with the book. So that's the way it started. And I wrote some children's books based on stories I told my daughters. Where I was getting revenge on my terrible grade 2 teacher that I'd had 40 years before. She paid for it, let me tell you. And so, like, a friend of mine said, what he wants on his tombstone is, well, at least he got a book out of it. And I think that's kind of the way my life has been. You know, like all these experiences have informed my writing. I've been very fortunate. I've had a couple of Canadian bestsellers. And have had, I've had a wonderful career, and writing has been part of it. And now I'm living in St. Catharines, Ontario.
Lovely. Thank you for the background. I learned something about geography and history, and interesting that you were writing curriculum and training programs and writing also. I don't often hear that with the fiction and the nonfiction about the instruction part, in addition to the creative, the imaginative part. So thank you for tying those two together, Don. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dan Flanigan with an I after the N instead of an A, because we're used to Flanigan and it's Flanigan.
Yes.
So nice to have you. Would you please regale us with your story? Welcome.
Thank you. The idea of being a writer descended upon me in high school, and I did all I could in high school. I wrote poems, short stories, published in the yearbook, that kind of thing. But then I sort of drifted away from it. One problem is, where do you enter? What do you do? How do you, quote, be a writer? But I got very fortunate in college. I wrote a history paper, and I didn't even major in history. I got it back, and it said A+. If you'd like a fellowship to Rice University, I can get it for you. So I went to Rice, got a PhD in history and a law degree at the same time. It was American constitutional history. No intention ever to practice law. Just wanted to be a better academic. And my academic career, I taught at the University of Virginia, only lasted 3 semesters, and ended up then pursuing the other side, the legal part. And and at one level that went very well. At 36, I was married, had a 6-year-old daughter, and the things that yuppies, had back then. That was 1983, but miserable. Was an alcoholic. Everything was unhappy. I thought I'd sold out being a lawyer, not being a writer. All the things an alcoholic makes up. Luckily, I was intervened on. Went to treatment, changed my life, and from there I went with my wife. She and I founded our own drug and alcohol treatment center in Tucson, Arizona, called Sierra Tucson. And during that period where I separated from the legal career for a while, I also wrote a lot. And I had a stage reading of a play in New York. The novel, I wrote a novel, got an agent, got a publisher. Publisher went bankrupt. Where do you go with a serious play? Who knows? And finally the whole process was frustrating enough. I said, I'm giving it up. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm not going to make myself unhappy anymore. I'm not even think about it. And had a fairly long and interestingly creative legal career. I was the 97th lawyer in our firm in 1999. And we decided we were Kansas City and St. Louis. We're now over 1,000 lawyers and in 24 cities in the United States. Wow. That was a creation. Okay. But anyway, but this thing never leaves you. So very unfortunately, my wife died, contracted cancer, died in 2011. And that brought me back to writing, really, because I wanted to write something about her and her last illness. And so I wrote a book of poems called Tenebrae. And that just sort of triggered doing a lot more. And I ended up writing now this detective series, out of that. And I'll leave that for any further inquiry because I'm past my 3 minutes.
This was, thank you. Thank you, Dan, for the story. I didn't know a lot of that about you from the bio you sent me. And thank you for what I'll call a heartfelt introduction of you and for sharing who you are and what you've been through. This is what makes us creatives, right? It's not just the smiley, happy things. It's the trials and tribulations. It's the frustrations. It's the roadblocks. It's the bumps. It's the potholes. It's whatever we come across. Don't you think that enriches us and gets us to think different ways, Dan?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. I got a yes out of him. He's almost smiling.
Well, you froze there on my end for a minute.
Oh,
so
sorry.
I only heard the very end of what you said.
Okay. Well, sorry. Thank you for the yes.
I thought I'd get away with yes.
No, it was perfect, actually. It was perfect. Yes, we're not storming here today. I'm in East Tennessee, and we had storms yesterday. The rain, if the word torrential wasn't enough to describe the heaviness of the rain, it's like the house was in a shower. That's how bad it was. It was just, and I have friends. I was supposed to do a radio show with somebody, a separate show, just a little conversation for 15 minutes. And she's in another part of Tennessee. She said the storms were so bad, she couldn't even keep her internet. So I hope we're okay. But I think it's sunshiny out here now. So Dan Flanigan, I was trying to say thank you for your bio and thank you for sharing the details with us because you're a real person. And now we know you. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry about your loss for your wife. And I would love to hear some of the poems if you'd like to share them later in the show. If you have your book handy. And let's go to DC. DC, I never know whether to separate the D and the C, to put a period after each of them, to put a space if I put the period. I've seen it written every single way. You've been on the show before. I didn't run the audience-ometer to find out how many people remembered you. So just pretend it's your debut on my show, DC. Welcome back. And start from scratch. Tell us who you are and what your creativity is. Welcome.
you so much for having me, Red. It's always a pleasure. So, a little bit about me that most people don't know. I am what I consider myself a storyteller. I've been a storyteller all my life. I haven't been an author. So, that's something that I claimed recently. I went to school and my background's in film and television. That's kind of what my dream was when I was a kid. I wanted to be a filmmaker, I wanted to make all these incredible movies. And graduated from college. I graduated from NYU. And I think when I was a junior in college, I had this epiphany to realize that I'm like, what is this 21-year-old girl going to write movies about? What do I know about to write? And I think that's when reality kind of clicked. Then I had this epiphany that I don't know if it makes sense now, but it kind of worked out at the end. I went ahead and joined the military. So put yourself back in 2001. I went into the army because I wanted to write stories about people. I wanted to connect. I wanted to write stories about things that make sense. And I also wanted to pay some college loans, let's be honest. And then 9/11 happened. So my life took a very different turn. I was in basic training when 9/11 happened. And that life of the creative kind of went on hold. It kind of took a very different turn. I left New York City just a few months prior. A lot of my friends were still there. And I just kind of got very much into like, what do I need to do? How do I serve? How do I take care of, the people that I love? How do I protect the country? All those things that was at the time, completely reshape my creative world. So for about a decade or so, I became very engrossed in that world, kind of became an adult. I say it too kind of jokingly. I did a lot of adulting. And then I found myself sick and tired and miserable. I had the job, I had the career, all the things that people say you're supposed to have. And I was miserable. I wasn't doing what I always say it is my inborn talent to be creative. And I'm in East Texas, and it's very hard to do films all by yourself in East Texas. So I literally decided, what can I use to express myself? And that's kind of how writing came into my bubble. Did lots of research, I want to say almost 7, 8 years ago. And that's how I started writing novels. And then I decided, why not? I like all different genres. So I started with urban fantasy. And DC, you can put period, you can take the period off. It is my middle name because at the time I kind of joke, I said, I lived in East Texas as a Bible Belt, and I'm writing about witches and devils and all sorts of madness. And I was like, oh, they're going to kick me out of my neighborhood. So my first name cannot be in the cover of these books. So we went with middle name to be on the safe side. And now it's just very much commonplace. All my people understand that's what I do. I do a little bit of nonfiction here and there. I've done children's books, but I found a way to express my creativity and find my soul and balance the whole everyday adult life with what I'm supposed to do, my purpose in life.
Thank you, DC. That was lovely. Absolutely lovely. I have a comment for Dan Flanigan. You're the one who said you wrote a play, right? You wrote plays. And what do you do? What do you do with your plays, right, Dan? Well, I wrote 3 romantic comedy plays about 10 years ago, and I decided one night I wanted to write a play. So I looked up, how do you format a play? How do you write it? And I found a playwriting 101, and I copied it into a Word document, the font, the spacing, how you set the scene, how you describe the characters, how you go from act to scene and act to scene, how you the curtain rise and the close. And I wrote it, and in 3 nights from 1 to 4 a.m., I had my first play. And what was I going to do with it? Well, I was producing cable TV, local access TV. I had my own show for years, and I knew people who were in community theater. And I contacted them and I said, if I make this really easy for you, I don't ask you to memorize a script. There were 3 actors. I'll get 3 damn teleprompters, and you can just glance at the script, because they were all in plays all over Long Island, and they weren't getting paid by me, and they weren't getting paid for the community theater either. And they said, we'll do it. So I got 2 sets of actors. I trained them in how to do my play. I directed it, produced it, and then I had to edit it down to 26 minutes and 30 seconds because my TV show was a half-hour show and they needed room for the PSAs. So that was what I did with my plays. I did it for all 3 plays, Dan, and I had a blast. I had a blast. And I would love to see these plays done on a real stage somewhere.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, fantastic.
yeah.
I took this play and made it into a novella, sort of almost all dialogue, but a novella. And now I'm doing an audiobook out of that. And so it'll end up being kind of a play,
Nice. Very nice. Well, I did something called a cold reading salon when I was in Durham, North Carolina for the the community. And I decided I was going to do some storytelling, DC, but in the form of having people, 25 people signed up. We did one of the conference rooms, and I took plays by Roald Dahl and other plays that were available free of charge without any copyright issues on the web. And I printed them out and I threw them on a table. And 25 people came, and I said, just go through the table and pick. It'll say on the cover, it'll say, is it a monologue, a dialogue? Is it a three-act something? And I said, just pick something and then spend 5 minutes reading it. And it was cold reading. That was the point. And I took a scene from one of my plays, Dan, and I shoveled it into this mix on the table, and somebody picked it. And this person gets up and they're starting to read this dialogue to people from one of the scenes in my play. And I'm listening, I'm saying, damn, that's funny. I wonder who wrote that. And I realized it was my play. I said, shit, somebody really knew how to write good dialogue. And it was mine. It was such a feeling of pride that I could write, that I could. Anyway, enough about all of that. Let's go to the opening quotes. You've each sent me a creative quote from a character in a fictional movie or a TV show or a song lyric. And I'm mad at Don Sawyer because he picked from a classic movie. The character is Richard Sherman, played by the actor named Tom Ewell, Ewell. Not too many people remember him. The 7-Year Itch, 1955 romantic comedy film. Oh my goodness. The budget was 1.8 million, if you can believe that, Don. 1.8 million. That's like, that wouldn't pay for the craft cart for the food today. And the box office was 12 million. So it was a wild success. Starring Marilyn Monroe and Tom Ewell, he did the role on stage. It contains one of the most iconic pop culture images of the 20th century. Marilyn Monroe standing in this white halter dress over a grating, a subway grating, where the passing train goes underneath and her skirt flies up. That's one of the, I think Pretty Woman had a similar scene, but this is from this movie. And 7-Year Itch, that's why I named the show today, The Itch of Creativity. But basically, he's a middle-aged guy, and he is studying a book by a psychologist who says after 7 years, men get restless in their marriage, and they look elsewhere. And so-called Marilyn, who has no name in the movie, did she just the girl? Can you imagine, DC? They named the character The Girl, capital T, capital G. She rents the apartment upstairs. His wife and kid are up in Maine for the summer, and she accidentally drops a potted plant down, and it hits him while he's reading this book on his balcony from her balcony, and he invites her down, and then he fantasizes about having a you-know-what with her, and all kinds of things happen. So anyway, here is the quote that he says in the show, and you're going to tell us what this has to do with your creativity, Mr. Sawyer. So here's the quote. It's just my imagination. Some people have flat feet. Some people have dandruff. I have this appalling imagination. Don, that's probably one of the best quotes I've ever seen. How did you find this quote? Tell me.
Well, I got to be honest here, because I was not sure where to go with this. So I was looking for I think I said best quotes from films to do with imagination. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through like hundreds. And then this came out and I said, is it? Because imagination, obviously that's a lot of what we're talking about today, right? Imagination sort of is an integral part of creativity. But those of us who know, what I like about this is that it sets it along this same lines as flat feet and dandruff. It's at worst a mixed blessing. I mean, imagination means that your brain doesn't turn on. It's sort of constantly cranking. I've been meditating for 50 years, and I suppose I get maybe a minute of quiet, every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But the imagination, the imaging, the process is just always ongoing, and it can be tiring, exhausting at times. So channeling that imagination in a constructive way has been key for me, just to kind of keep me sane, if nothing else.
Thank you. Very, very interesting. Dan Flanigan went dark on us. I just see a black screen. Dan, are you still with us? Because I was going to read your quote next. Dan Flanigan, can you talk? Is he there? He hasn't dropped out. He's still on the.
Frozen.
He's frozen, but it's all. Dan Flanigan, can you say hello so we know if you're still hearing us? Because your microphone and camera still are showing present. You might want to reconnect it. I'll let you back in. Okay. I'm going to have to move ahead to DC because I can't hear him. And I had a wonderful quote from him. So, DC, will go to you. The quote you picked is from Alice, voiced by Catherine Beaumont. Alice in Wonderland, 1951. We're going back in time here. It's time travel. Animated musical fantasy comedy film, Walt Disney's adaptation of Lewis Carroll's classic story. Let's see what else I want to tell you. No, is he back yet? There he is. Dan Flanigan, you're back. Are you okay? I think you froze. We can't hear you.
I just had an interruption to it.
Okay, we can barely hear you. I'm just moving ahead to DC's quote and then I'll come back to you while you get settled, okay?
Great.
No problem. So DC, the quote you pick, young Alice, we know, falls down a rabbit hole to enter a nonsensical world of Wonderland ruled by the Queen of Hearts, encountering strange creatures, don't we all, including the Mad Hatter and the Cheshire Cat. And here's the quote you picked. But that's just the trouble with me. I give myself very good advice, but I very seldom follow it. Love the quote, DC. Talk to us. Go ahead.
I've been accused notoriously for being very deep and intense and giving lots and lots of advice. And I recently had to kind of do one of those self-reflections, like, do I follow my own advice? Is this something that I really listen to? I've been working on a book that is an Alice in Wonderland retelling. So that has been on my mind. I've been paying attention to this book a lot. And when that quote came up, I was like, oh my God, how perfect is that? Sometimes I think we have the best intentions and we try to help everybody. But how often do we take the time to go back and say, did I listen to myself? Am I taking, back to what Dawn said, am I taking care of myself? Am I being good to myself? Or am I just passing out wisdom to the world and never actually paying attention? So Alice has that moment that I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely me this week.
Just this week, right?
Only claiming this week. I don't know about the rest of the time, but yeah, I'm
okay.
Today.
Very interesting. Thank you. I love the quote. It's a little bit different than the ones we usually get from Alice in Wonderland. Dan Flanigan, you're back. Just say hello so I know I've got your audio. Dan?
Hello.
Oh, wonderful. Oh my God, that's better than the voice you started with. Here, you picked a song called Roll Me Away, written by rock artist Bob Seger on the album The Distance by Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. It's the opening song on the Face the Promise tour in 2006 to 7, his first tour in a decade. And the song was inspired by a motorcycle trip to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And here's the quote. I'm not going to sing it. I don't know the song. Got to keep rolling. Got to keep riding. Got to keep searching till I find what's right. And as the sunset faded, I spoke to the faintest first starlight. And I said, next time, we'll get it right. Oh, that's beautiful, Dan. Do you know the song? You want to sing it? My drums are in the other room.
I definitely don't want to sing it, but I love that song. And I think it's an anthem for my generation in a lot of ways.
Fabulous. Talk to me about what's this got to do with how you create.
Well, thematically, a lot of my work and is about people who get lost and sort of found again. And in a way, I feel like my whole generation got lost and found again. And I think that's what that song's about, especially at the end there. I actually used that line in the first of these O'Keeffe novels at the end. And the hero's gotten himself in all kinds of trouble up to that point. And he's, his last thing is, well, next time we'll get it right. So that's where it came from.
I like that. Before we thank you all for the quotes, before we go to the creativity statements, I thought I would read for all of you. I told you I belong to a poetry group on Writer's Digest, and we get a prompt every week. And I will warn you that in April and November, we get a prompt every day, and it's called the PAD Poem a Day Challenge. And I typically write 5 to 10 poems a day for those months. I just get up in the morning and I write. But right now I write one limerick, one double or triple haiku, and one acrostic. And I wanted to read you, since we're talking about creativity. Last Wednesday, the prompt was write a shifting poem. Anything to do with the word shift, the verb shifting, the adjective, anything. You get free reign. And poets from all walks of life, I don't know. A few of them are coming on this show on next Monday, I've met. But I have no idea who they are. And they write all kinds of poetry. And some of it is very revealing of their lives and their families and their history. Some of it a little edgy on political. We try to stay away from that, I think, but it's very revealing and very personal. So here's the quote I took shift, and I turned it into night shift, and I wrote an acrostic. So the lines start with NIGHTSHIFT. So you'll have to imagine where I'll emphasize the first word, okay? And I think you'll enjoy this. So never quite really at rest. It's the life of a creative. Going, gripping, gyrating, growling, groaning, growing. Highs and lows flowing on a mental Mobius strip. The days are the nights are the days again, shifting off and on into and out of gear, hoping for unique brilliance even once. It's a calling, command, curse roller coaster. Finding eureka, euphoria, and amid frustration, fears. Thus is the life of the creative. What do you think?
I like it.
Like it? Yeah, it took about 5 minutes to write that. I just sit down and write and just you post them on a website at disq.us, Discuss website, and people can give you a thumbs up. I've never seen a thumbs down, and we comment on each other's poems, what that mean to us and how we like it or what we gain from it. So it's a community of poets. But Dan Flanigan, what'd you think? Cool beans?
Yes, I think it would have taken me 5 months to write that, though.
Thank you. When you get in this poetry, you wake up Wednesday and you say, "What's the prompt?" And Robert Lee Brewer is the moderator. He's a senior editor at Writer's Digest, and he can post his prompt on a separate web page every week. You just increase the number of we're up to week 705 this week from when he started doing it. And you just go and find the introduction. Today's poem is about such and such. And then he writes a sample, and then people just join during the day and post their poems. And then we go back and comment on each other. It's a lovely thing to do. And once you get in the mode, I wake up and I can't wait to write poetry. So thank you for listening. Don Sawyer. I got my Dans and Dons mixed up. Don Sawyer, I'm picking your statement. I'm going to pick one creativity statement from each of you. We got plenty of time, and I'd like you to unpack it. This one's a little long, so I won't read it all. And if anybody else has a comment, just wave one of your light fingers at me and I'll call you. So here we go. He says, well, my mother said I didn't talk until I was 2. Apparently moon was my first word, and I haven't stopped since. I like words. I like the worlds that I was able to visit through my books, my undying gratitude to Tolkien for saving me from a soul-crushing adolescence. And I could use them pretty well because I was shy. I was better off with writing than public speaking. So why don't you give us a little about that? Don, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, it's always your mother's fault.
That's why I picked that one.
Yeah, I know. And in many ways, she was a marvelous woman. In many ways, she was a very difficult person to have as a mother. But I think what I was really trying to say there was that I found both escape and satisfaction in reading and writing. I grew up in a suburb outside of Detroit, and for me, it was a very sterile. It was the opposite of creativity. It was very stratified socially, racially, and I never fit there. So fortunately, I found these outlets, starting with the Hardy Boys, and working up into Tolkien. And they took me somewhere else, and I think that really, meant a lot to me. But it also, as I progressed further, it also informed my writing, and I realized that those were standards to strive for. That maybe that I could provide that kind of escape for readers, and not just escape, but the reflection on who we are and that kind of thing. And as I say too, my mother. She was all about productivity. Things had to be done. I had to. It wasn't good enough to. And I think she was right. I mean, we have a problem, right? Ideas isn't really creativity. It's the genesis of creativity. But until you take those ideas and apply them, you really you haven't really created much of anything. And so I think that that emphasis from her on actually acting and creating and doing had a huge influence on me, and it convinced me that it's not just enough to look at a problem or a situation. You really then have to apply all your resources to solving it, to responding to it, to reacting to it.
I love the word you used, apply. I need to start using that in my instructions to my future guests on the show. I've just invited 43 people from the Publicity Summit to be on, and the creativity statements I'm getting are not reality. They are high level. My imagination fuels my creativity. I said, but what did you create? Creativity is joy and it's happiness, but what did you create? Did you write? Did you paint? Did you cook? Did you sing? Did you sit in a room and think about what you're going to do tomorrow and create your calendar, your schedule, your life for tomorrow? What did you create? And it's very hard for some people, and I'm not being critical, I'm just being optimistic that they'll get the idea of applying. Don, that was a brilliant word. Thank you very much. You
Well,
might have saved me hours of
you
frustration
can
with
share
it.
it any way you like.
Anybody from the summit who's listening to the show, because you all got the promo today, think about applying your concept of creativity to what you create. It doesn't have to be a poem, it doesn't have to be a song or a dance or a painting. You're creating something, your lifestyle, how you walk, how you talk, how you do your business, how you decorate your home. What do you create with that imagination? Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Before I get too mushy here, let's move on. Dan Flanigan with an I. There, you'll always be Dan Flanigan with an I to me. I'm looking at your statement number 2, and this is very interesting because all 3 of you are writers, and I'm a sometime writer. And here you go. You say, I do not write regularly. I have tried to write daily, as many recommend, but have not succeeded. I'm not particularly happy with this approach, but it seems to be natural for me and has still produced a decent volume of work. Mr. Flanigan, tell us, are you a pantser or a plotter? When do you write? How do you know when it's time for you to write?
Uh, that's evolving, but I will write out a very rough outline, know where I'm going, and I usually know the last line of the book and the last page, but I do not do a detailed outline, and a lot of it, a lot of things change in the course of a book. A lot of times I get in a cul-de-sac and can't get out of it and need to do something else. Or the best part is when you get much better ideas than you started with, because the characters have their own logic, and then the situation has its own logic. So I would rather be more regular than I am. I call it my style manic depressive writing style, but and I'm actually getting somewhat more regular, but usually I have to put together 3 and 4 day weekends and just get into it intensively over a period of time like that, or a long vacation or something.
Interesting. Very interesting. Do you write for a long period of time when you do write, Dan? Is it 2 hours, 6 hours, days at a time? What do you do once you get into it?
That too is manic depressive, but if I can spend days at it, I can do it slowly all day long for days. So I don't know if that's a good, very helpful answer.
That's a perfect answer, because you're a real person and you're a real writer, and I'm interested in how you do it. That's why it's the perfect answer.
The great thing I found out in terms of, I mean, to me, writer's block is every paragraph. And the thing I found to get around that, I'm really happy about, is if it's seen somehow you don't want to do, can't do, whatever, go to one down the road that you know you want to have in, and you can come back to the one that you couldn't do, and often that ends up being very good, but it just wasn't at the time.
Yeah,
that's helped me a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. There is no right or wrong answer. We just want to know who you are and what your position is on that. And interesting, that's a segue to one of DC's comments, because she says, you know which one, I'm a seasonal writer. Instead of writing every day, I do better in the fall and winter months. Interesting that, but DC, I want to go to your next statement. You say, depending on the project I'm working on, it will dictate my location for writing. If I'm doing action scenes, I enjoy writing in coffee shops so I can people watch. If I'm doing more emotionally charged scenes, I will stay home. You also say you're more creative in the mornings. Go ahead, tell us about the coffee shop writing. How do you do it? And don't they throw you out? Aren't they supposed to throw people out after 1 cup in 5 hours? Or how does it work today? I don't know.
Find coffee or tea, they'll keep you there, don't worry about it. I'm definitely a seasonal writer, but definitely depending on my location. I have a friend that says she gets inspired, she makes her own inspiration. I tend to go places. So if I'm doing action, I want to be near people, I want to hear them, I want to be involved. But I usually go to Books a Million for anybody who has one nearby. And then I sit facing the window. So the action is behind me. So all I get to hear is the sound of people walking, and I get to see cars going by. So it makes it really exciting just to be in the environment without getting lost too much in the people. If I'm writing emotion, I just finished writing the first draft to an upcoming book, and the endings just crushed me, and I'm sitting here in tears. That's not something I'm interested in doing in public. I'm not interested in being the crazy girl typing away, having tears flowing down my face, because then you have to explain this to people, because people will stop and be like, are you okay? And the hardest thing to tell people is like, well, I'm writing. And no, I'm not writing a Dear John letter. I'm not breaking up with anybody, but I'm just, destroying people in my book. So I tend to be very specific, where I kind of delve down into these different scenes just to keep myself sane and people not asking questions.
Thank you. I have heard that from other authors who've been on the show, that they create best when they're around people, when they're in coffee shops or public places where they can set up a laptop or a tablet. Very, very interesting. I want to go and thank you all for the first statements. We have a few more minutes before I go to my trivia. And so, Mr. Flanigan, I'm going to your statement number 4. I thought this was interesting. I will read it. Don't worry. You say, my inspirations are many. They include Dante, especially Shakespeare, Bach, especially Wordsworth, Dickens, especially Turgenev, Fathers and Sons, Tolstoy, of course, Anna Karenina, and the other 19th century Russians, Yeats, Joyce, Fitzgerald, Faulkner, Joseph Campbell, Robert Stone, E.L. Doctorow, the plays Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and Chorus Line, Bob Dylan, Paul Simon, many other composers, lyricists, and librettists of pop, rock, and stage music who gave us snatches of startling poetic insights, and I'm sure many more. All of these are there somewhere from a lifetime of reading, watching, listening, and tend to pop up as if they're always running in the background and sometimes thrust to the fore without being specifically called forth. That was lovely. I hope I read it well. Tell me, what does this all mean to you? Who's your favorite now? Is this seasonal, where one spring it's Shakespeare and then it's Doctorow? Do they cycle? How do you do it?
I have to say the favorite now is me, because that's all I'm doing is writing my own. I'm hardly reading anymore except for research related to the books. But it's really almost always with me Shakespeare and Dickens, and especially most recently Dickens. And I don't write like Dickens, and never would propose that I could, but he's my current inspiration in terms of, boy, I'd like to do some characters like this and that.
Thank you very much. When I was writing my plays, my characters just talked to me. They told me what they wanted to say.
Yeah.
I didn't have, that's why I was able to write from 1 to 4 in the morning, 3 nights in a row, and the play was done. They told me what to say. They told me how to start it, how to end it, who they were. And I was just a channel. I was just this vehicle for them. They were so clear in who they were and what they liked and didn't like and how they reacted and responded to each other and what their backstories were. I was just the channel.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
that was quite an experience. I really should. I'm writing a satirical novel in DC. I have to use a pen name, a nom de plume, because if the people from North Carolina, where I used to live, recognized my name on the book, they'd come after me, and it wouldn't be a very pretty picture. It'd be the fodder for a good detective mystery, and it would be no mystery on, yeah, it's that bad. But it's satirical, and it's about living in a 55 plus HOA controlled community, and it's viciously funny. I mean, but the problem is that it's a almost murder mystery. Almost. Well, I was having so much fun writing the satire that I forgot to finish the murder. So I pulled the scenes about the murder out and made them into a separate document. I wrote another 15, 20,000 words. Now I'm stuck putting them back together because I have the whole story of the background, and then I have this event that's supposed to happen in that background. And once I wrote the last line from the character in that murder part, I haven't been able to touch it. And it's been about 2 months. Anybody have a clue as to how to get unstuck? Hmm? Just
Well,
leave. What do you think?
in my current book, The Burning Gym, is an urban fantasy, and I wrote that over a period of 8 years, And actually, and there's a sequel to it, which is fortunately that Castle Bridge is bringing out in a year, called The Tunnels of Buddha. But the point is, I wrote it really as a single manuscript. And unfortunately, it came out to about 190,000 words. And you can imagine how many publishers were interested in that. So I decided to break it into two, right? And I said, well, wait a minute, it's one book. But I worked with an editor who I have a lot of respect for, and really helped me break it into two self-standing books, but also had a close connection. So it was an interesting process, somewhat different from yours, but the same idea of reconnecting parts that were originally sort of intended to be one.
I just had a great time, and Dan Flanigan, I kept going back to it, and every time I went back, I had to add a few more words to a character or a scene, and I just was having so much fun. It was like writing a comedy routine. I used to do stand-up, like I told you, and I just try to be funny sitting down now. I mostly write sitting down. Hey, everybody, I have a couple of events in music history today in July 29th. Would you like to hear them? Please say yes, somebody. Today, in 1961, on July 29th, Dick Clark presented his first Caravan of Stars review at the Steel Pier in Atlantic City, New Jersey, featuring the Shirelles, Clarence Frogman Henry, and the Jive Five, if you can believe that. In 1963, on this day, Capitol Records sent disc jockeys, DJs in the U.S., a list of hot rod terms to talk about with the latest music trend. They were giving them vocabulary. In 1965, the Supremes began a 3-week run at the Copacabana nightclub. I was there once in New York City, a showcase for Motown's hottest act, and had 5 #1 hits. On this day, the same day, the Beatles movie Help premiered at the London Pavilion Theater. There you go. On this day in 67, the Doors' Light My Fire hit #1 for 3 weeks, and it knocked off the Beatles' All You Need Is Love. Can you imagine that? The Doors knocked the Beatles off of #1. And one more. Let's see. Kenny Loggins and Stevie Nicks released Whenever I Call You Friend, which is a wonderful song, in 1978. Let's go to famous birthdays. Martina McBride is 58 today. I'm not getting a notice from my engineer. I've got plenty of time. Martina McBride, the country singer with pop country sound. Album is Wild Angels, 1995 she started. Multiple platinum selling albums. She performed in her father's country band, and she's been called the Celine Dion of country music. I didn't know that. 58. Happy birthday, Martina McBride. Anybody remember Will Wheaton, who was on the Big Bang Theory? He was playing himself as a famous scientist. Anyway, he's 52 today. Anybody remember How I Met Your Mother, the TV show, which I loved and binged on? Josh Radnor, the star, the guy who did he marry? He's 50 today. Clara Bow, who passed away in 1965. Anybody remember her? Alluring silent movie star who starred in It and Wings movies in 1937. She was one of the leading sex symbols of the Roaring '20s. She retired from movies at the age of 28. Oh my goodness gracious. Today I have two stars of YouTube and TikTok, and we're going to celebrate their birthdays. And Dan Flanigan, you've never heard of them, and neither have I, but just celebrate with me. Eva Gutowski, Gutowski, is 30 today. She's on YouTube. The only reason we're talking about her is she has 11 million subscribers. Dan, 11 million. Her My Life as something or other channel, she posts videos relating to beauty. She has a web series, How to Survive a Breakup. I'm sorry if I'm making fun. She worked as a cashier in a pizza shop and studied journalism, and she has a TikTok account with 7 million fans. Wouldn't we like to be her for a day, Dan and Don and DC? 11 and 7. Yes. And then on TikTok, we have Ella Schnacky, Schnacky. She's 20. She only has 1.3 million followers. She shares pranks and skits and comedic videos, and she's the younger sister of Noah. There we go. Today is Cheese Sacrifice Purchase Day. Anybody know why you would sacrifice cheese? Anybody have an idea? You're supposed to put it in a mousetrap, but studies show mice don't like cheese, so don't waste it. It's International Tiger Day. It's National Get Gnarly Day. You all know where gnarly came from, the word? Anybody? 2 minutes. I got to finish this up. The Whirlpool Corporation in 2016 started a campaign to put gnarliness, NAR, into work to encourage their employees to reach the goals and satisfy customers. The NAR stands for North American Region. The campaign was a success. It's National Lipstick Day. It's National Lasagna Day. It's Chicken Wing Day, and it's Rain Day. It's Watercolor Month, Doghouse Repair Month, Smart Irrigation Month, and Family Golf Month. And it's a month of corn, eggplant, lasagna awareness. Don Sawyer, look up. Are you aware of lasagna? I'm very worried about you.
What can I say?
It's
I love lasagna, especially with eggplant.
You better be aware. It's Blueberry Month, Horseradish Month, Grilling Month, Ice Cream, Picnic, Watermelon, and Culinary Arts. In 2014, I closed the show, DC, with the top 10 tips for women. And the first one was Aspire to be Barbie. The biatch has everything. And that was 10 years before the movie. So here we go with the closing words, and don't go away. Guess I've got 1 minute to finish this. Everybody join with me and listen up. Life is short. Break the rules. Forgive quickly. Kiss slowly. Yes. Love truly. Everybody join me in a quick laugh. 1, 2, 3. Laugh uncontrollably and never, ever regret anything that made you smile. Why? Here we go. Work like you don't need the money. Dance like no one's watching. When I taught disco in high heels, they watched. Sing like nobody's listening. I didn't sing but once. Love like you've never been hurt. Get over it. We all have. It makes for a good novel anyway. Money talks. Chocolate sings. And last but not least, I stole this line from a host 20 years ago. Thank you for turning me on. Radio Red, wave goodbye. Dan and Don and DC wave. Don't go away, guests. Michael, are we out?
We are out.
Good. And I finished about 10 seconds ahead of time. Bye. So